Hello, everybody. I'm Richard Brent, the editor-in-chief of our LPM magazine, for those who don't know me, and a very warm welcome. And thank you very much for joining us today for the launch of this digital LPM conference, very kindly sponsored by our partners behind me on the screen here. You can see their names behind me on the screen here: Access Point, Cloud Genie, CTS, Iceberg, and Net Documents. And we've got a great broad range of sessions over 3 days for you this week, which is a blend of interviews with the LPM magazine team and the interactivity and group challenge tackling that we've always sought to include in the events that we've run, whether in person or digitally. And absolutely all of this is designed to deliver some really practical insight, as ever, based on how your peers are also approaching some common strategic and operational challenges. We'll be exploring everything from making the firm's business activity more environmentally sustainable, very topical, of course, to effective succession planning through these times of uncertainty, the changing risk landscape, to the latest new lever that firms may or may not be addressing carefully as office life now starts to return: hybrid working. But by way of opening, I was quite interested to see that in the 2020 Bellwether report that was published only today, and on which the LPM data and editorial team have been supporting LexisNexis to poll over 300 lawyers at SME firms like yourselves, like your own rather. The three threats that those lawyers regarded as the most significant to their businesses were the rising cost of PI insurance, compliance demands, and talent attraction and retention. That's good to know, in a sense, as we'll be covering all of those throughout the week's proceedings. And while they may, of course, have intensified, they're not new challenges. Perhaps more surprisingly, the circumstances of COVID-19 specifically came quite a lot lower down that list of the threats that lawyers see looming. And 42% of those taking the survey reported expecting most people to return to the office to work for a full 5 days a week. So I'd be interested to find out what our panelists in the first session of the conference make of that one, as well as much else. This one I'll be chairing for you myself. It's called How to Achieve Sustainable Business Growth in a Disrupted Market. We'll be discussing what makes up a professional purpose and values, and whether articulating those well and often can help with other challenges, such as effective differentiation in the eyes of either clients or the firm's own people. And the session is being recorded, so please bear that in mind, but do also feel free to ask questions at any point using the Q&A here on Zoom, or of course just have your own say on what people are talking about. I'll put comments or questions to our speakers through the course of the hour. So without further ado, my guests who are giving their takes on all of this, the business of strategy, vision and values today, are Christina Blacklaws, who I am sure many of you will know is the former president of the Law Society of England and Wales, having developed and managed one of the first virtual law firms prior to that, as well as setting up the UK's very first alternative business structure in the cooperative group. She was also one of the first directors of innovation at a leading UK law firm. We also have Peter Taylor, who has been managing partner since 2015 of the law firm Paris Smith. He chairs the firm's management team, implements strategy, of course, and leads on communicating purpose to both clients and the firm's people. We also have Jennifer Swallow, who is a lawyer herself and director of Law Tech UK, which is a government-backed initiative to transform the legal sector through technology. She's had plenty of experience working on high-growth tech companies, including through leadership roles at Yahoo and TransferWise. And fourth, last but by no means least, we have Colum Smith, who is the Chief Vision Officer of Taylor Rose MW, a very seasoned litigator and legal risk specialist, as well as being a leader. And he's grown several businesses throughout his career, most recently taking this firm, Taylor Rose MW, to the 70 million mark following a number of acquisitions that you've probably seen mentioned in the legal press, and establishing a consultancy model which offers lawyers more flexibility. The firm stated it plans to be an even bigger player in the consumer law firm market as it continues to expand. So lots of different perspectives that we can take and distill and share with you. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Christina Blacklaws, who is going to say a few words to start. Christina, Welcome.
Thank you, Richard. It's delightful to be here. And well done for joining this session, because I know that you're going to be getting an awful lot out of it. We have some amazing panelists. So I've got about 10 minutes, and I took it as my job to convince you that all those problems that you face, all of those issues that you have identified, that purpose and values and holding true to those are actually really important, in fact critical to the future success and indeed survival of your law firm. So let me start off by talking about a subject which I know dominated our every waking thought during the first lockdown. Yes, I'm going to talk about loo roll. So the company Cheeky Panda is a sustainability-led business. The founders went on holiday to Southeast Asia, and they saw how much bamboo was being discarded. And shockingly, every single day, 27,000 trees are cut down for conventional toilet paper. So they decided to develop a more sustainable alternative. The company's 3 core tenets are, and this covers all aspects of their business: to innovate, to impact, and to inspire. And this has led to a huge expansion into all sorts of other products and areas as well. And they have several guiding principles to reduce deforestation, improve animal welfare, promote sustainability sources, use natural resources, and promote employee welfare. And within 3 years from starting the company, it's become #1 best-selling product on Amazon, sold in over 20 countries, valued at least 25 million. And it was initially funded by crowdfunding, which proves that there's a really large untapped market for ethical and sustainable companies. But I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, that's loo roll and we sell law. However, I want to suggest to you that the principles behind a purpose-driven business apply just as much to legal services as to any other business. And next, I know, because I'm a lawyer too, you'll be thinking, well, that's anecdotal, and what I require is an evidential basis. So let me give you the research. Deloitte has done some really interesting work in this field last year, and their research found that purpose-driven companies witness higher market share gains and grow 3 times faster on average than their competitors, all while achieving higher workforce and customer satisfaction. So first of all, let's do the last bit: customers or clients. The top issues they identified clients have when making decisions about which firm or business to buy from: 28% on how the company treats its own people, 20% on how the company treats the environment, and 19% on how the company supports the communities in which it operates. More than 80% of consumers would be willing to pay more if a business raised its prices to be more environmentally and socially responsible, or to pay higher wages to its employees. Now, what about your talent, your people? In addition to purpose-orientated companies having higher productivity and growth rates, they have a much more satisfied workforce who stay with them longer. Deloitte's research showed that companies report 30% higher levels of innovation and 40% higher levels of workforce retention than their competitors. And this is so never more true than for millennials. And remember, millennials are now 50% of the workforce. They want to work for companies, for businesses with an authentic purpose, with more than 70% of millennials expecting their employers to focus on societal or mission-driven problems. And for Gen Z, it's even higher. And this research was entirely supported later on last year by research from PwC, and they surveyed over 2,000 people in the UK, and 70% of the UK population want business action on climate change and 65% on racism. Almost half, though, who were employed didn't know or didn't feel that their employer makes an important contribution to society. So I think there's some real opportunity there. And interestingly, nearly 60% felt that making society fairer should be a part of all organisations' purpose, even if the business was an SME. Indeed, the highest level of faith is actually invested in SME businesses, with about a third believing that these are the organisations that will walk the talk, that will actually act. Of course, there's no room for greenwashing, purpose washing, with nearly 60% of UK adults saying they would find it demotivating to work for an organisation that talks about wider societal purpose but doesn't take any action. And it's not all about climate change and sustainability. McKinsey's research just this year found that companies who are in the top quartile for gender diversity in their executive teams were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than companies in the bottom quartile. Indeed, there was a 48% differential in profit between the top and the bottom. And this has only increased since they first ran the survey in 2014. So your clients, your talent demand it, and your profits will increase if you can be a purpose-driven business. So how do you go about doing this? So like the respondees to the Deloitte survey, I have greater confidence in the SME market's ability to do this with drive and with authenticity. In small businesses, you have none of the diseconomies of scale, which make it challenging for larger businesses to change. No proverbial oil tanker. Critical strategic decisions can be made quickly. And you're probably already fairly clear, maybe very clear, about what is important to your people and to you. And if not, it's an awful lot easier to find it out and quickly. So what do I suggest that you do? Start by really thinking carefully about what is at the beating heart of your organisation. What's your rallying cry, the thing that you stand for? What for you gives your working life meaning and purpose? What makes it fulfilling for you and inspiring for you and others? What are you passionate about? This isn't something that can easily or perhaps ever be achieved, but it is, in the words of Simon Sinek. And if you haven't read The Infinite Game, then I highly recommend it to you. What he calls a just cause, something that is immutable, that speaks to you and your colleagues' hearts, something that you're all willing to make sacrifices for, go the extra mile for. And spoiler alert, that is never about increased profits for the equity partners. But some examples just to help you think here. So TED, their purpose is to spread ideas. IKEA, to create a better everyday life for people. Starbucks, to inspire and nurture the human spirit, one cup and one neighbourhood at a time. And a few from law firms, improving lives, communities and society. To enable our clients to succeed through having a positive experience with legal excellence. Smart modern law. And two of the above will be very familiar to our panelists. So once you've engaged with your people and agreed this, it honestly and challengingly, if that's a word, needs to be at the forefront of every strategic decision. Each discussion needs to start with an assessment of, does this further our purpose? And if not, we don't do it. And if it does, well, let's just get on with it. Let's go for it. This gives your organization a North Star, something that you will always follow, a constant compass that you will see that you're making the right decisions for the right reasons. And of course, you can look to external accreditation with this as well. There's ISO 4001 or B Corp, or you could join like-minded firms in the Legal Sustainability Alliance or the Net Zero Lawyers Alliance, or a myriad of other great organizations that are wanting to make our world a better place. So to conclude, if you get this right, you will not only have a compelling proposition for your staff, current and future, your clients and our society, but you'll also be making more money. So what's not to like? And thank you very much for listening.
Lots of food and potentially other groceries for thought there. I wish I'd come up with a Lou Roland Legal Services headline myself now. Thank you very much. We'll be saying goodbye to you for a little while I speak to some of our other panel members, but see you again for the wider discussion later. And now I'm going to speak to Peter Taylor, who I mentioned is the managing partner of Paris Smith. And we had a question in from the audience already responding to Christina's sort of opener there. How do people define and understand purpose? How do people define and understand the purpose of law firms? Which is almost exactly the sort of first question that I had for you, Peter. I was going to say, has your firm been through a process of trying to understand its purpose and defining perhaps its values? And what has that looked like? What was the trigger for that? And can you tell us a little bit about what that process has been?
Yeah, good morning, Richard, and good morning, everybody. And thank you to Christina, because one of the purpose definitions that she shared was indeed Paris Smith. So I became the managing partner in January 2015, and shortly before that, the senior partner asked me, what is the vision for the firm if I became the managing partner? And I actually went one stage back from that and tried to understand why we existed as a firm. What makes us different? What is our unique differentiating position? Why do we come to work? Why should anybody care about Paris Smith? And from that, and keeping asking the question why. And I firmly believe in Simon Sinek's earlier book, The Power of Why, and he actually started life as a lawyer and then became a marketing specialist. But for us, as Christina explained, it is enabling our clients, indeed our people in our communities, to succeed and thrive through having a positive experience with legal excellence. And if one has got a really clear sense of purpose, and we are fortunate because we sense check that right across the firm with some focus groups. Actually, that then makes decision making, particularly during the past 18 months, very, very straightforward. You touched on values. Again, we started that with a very honest discussion amongst partners. And we developed a partner charter, and it's not so much around the values, actually it's more around behaviors and what we expect of each other, because lots of businesses can say they've got values, but what does that mean in reality? How do people behave with each other? And we have a set of values, and it's encapsulated in the acronym SPIRIT, Paris Smith SPIRIT. So service, professionalism, integrity, always doing the right thing even when nobody else is looking, respect in relationships, thinking innovatively, and then underpinning all our relationships with trust. But the important thing is having a competency framework and behavior framework behind that, because that then helps me in enabling people to be the best versions of themselves, which is the core of how I see myself as a leader, to make sure that they stay on the right path. And if I see someone going slightly off piste, I can have a conversation. So which of those behaviors does what you've done accord with our values and our behavior framework?
Is that you have your Paris Smith Academy, don't you? Is that the sort of structure that helps to sort of shape that, to monitor that and feedback on behaviours, and if so, can you give us a couple of examples of the ways you might try and get people to live the values that you've identified?
So the Paris Smith Academy is a training platform within the firm, and it is again enabling people to be the best versions of themselves. What I was seeing certainly during my time is coming up from in those days it was an article clerk, trainee solicitor, through to being a partner. You get a lot of technical support, but it's those softer skills about how to have difficult conversations, how to do the networking, understanding the commercial realities of being involved in a business. So the academy takes people on a journey and a career development path from their very early stages, and it's for lawyers and non-lawyers, but up through associate level, teaching the skills of management, and then at a partner level, understanding what the difference is between management and leadership. In terms of living the values, I think consistency of communication and messaging, particularly from me. So I am one of our core values, and part of our DNA is being open and transparent with each other. So during the pandemic, I was clinically extremely vulnerable. I had a kidney transplant in 2004, so I was locked away and looking after 260 people from a converted bedroom as a study at home posed its challenges. But there were times where I found it really, really tough. And I shared with staff that if I was finding it tough, then sure as eggs are eggs, they would be finding it tough. So being realistic about the present, but equally being optimistic and hopeful about the future was at the core of a lot of my messaging. But as I say, so one example is just being authentic as a leader and being prepared to show vulnerability. For me, showing that vulnerability is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. I hope that will help.
That's great, thank you. Final one to put to you. You mentioned that I think that the pandemic had made making some decisions much more straightforward. I think that's the word you used anyway. I suppose it's plausible that the pandemic might have made some firms, as well as other businesses, sort of reevaluate their values. I just wonder if it has led anything to, if you've introduced anything new to either keep keep what everyone does in line with values, to keep everyone on the right path through the pandemic.
So if I give an example, right back at the start of the pandemic, I had a pretty emotional moment when I found out on Radio 4 News one morning, on Sunday morning, that because of my immune system was compromised, I was going to be locked away for at least 12 weeks. It turned out to be longer than that. And then Boris makes his announcement on the Monday evening. I immediately thought about the staff. How are they going to be thinking? So I sent a message to them saying, I've seen the TV broadcast from the Prime Minister. We had a very tight group of members of the management group and the board of the firm. It wasn't all members of the board and the management group, it was a much smaller group, which we formed as essentially a COBRA committee. And we worked out what we were going to do. And I had told the staff and all the firm that evening, I will come back to you by midnight as to what the plan is for the following day. And off the back of that, one of the things that I've done is to do a weekly video to the staff. Doesn't need to be very long, and I just record it on my phone and then send it out each Friday, 3.5 minutes, and it's just whatever comes into my head. Keep it simple, 3 simple messages each week. As to what you as a leader are seeing, how you're feeling, what you would like the staff to be doing and thinking. And for me, keeping that constant line of communication going is something I will continue. I have very much in mind the Steve Peters book, The Chimp Paradox. So if you allow a silence to develop in someone's brain, then they will generally look and fear the worst. So it was keeping people in that optimistic framework and mindset and not allowing their chimp to take control. I think the other thing that I would message I would like to convey is, and one that stuck with me through all those weeks and months, is it's not what you say, it's not necessarily what you do, but it's how you make people feel that is all important. So if you enable people to feel safe and secure within your firm, whether they're working within the office or whether they're working remotely, and being clear of what you expect from them, that will build that sense of trust, the chemical oxytocin, and they will pay you back in spades. And certainly that has stood us in good stead, and I'm sure will stand us in good stead for weeks and months to come.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. I think we should have some time for some more questions, potentially from those listening a little later. But for now, I'm going to say a quick goodbye. So thank you, and welcome our next speaker, my next guest, who is Jennifer Swallow, as I mentioned at the beginning, who is director of LawTech UK, and of course was listening to both Christina and to Peter, and I'm sure has some views on what they've said so far. But Jennifer, perhaps using your own sort of sector expertise, the context of that sector, what do you think that firms who are listening could learn from the way other businesses, so for example, you know, in the fintech area, how they approach the idea of purpose and values? Is it different or to what you've heard so far, or is it broadly similar?
Yeah, I think there's a huge amount we can learn, and fintech is a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of law tech, although the rise of law tech is incredible and extremely fast growth, growing 101% over the last 3 years, which is faster than any other applied tech sector, including fintech. So there's something happening, but there is a lot we can learn, and we should learn. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, in fintech, we were working with Zoom and other channels 5-10 years before the legal community caught on. So there's a lot that we can go in there and steal and apply. And I think, you know, if we're asking, how do you run a successful business? How do you make decent money? And how do you contribute in a game-changing way to society? Then we can look at many in the fintech sector. The company I worked for many years was TransferWise, which is moves money around the world. And one of the themes with fintechs is about purpose as their core why, for why they even established. And for TransferWise and for many, it's about wanting to completely change how the system works because they see that it doesn't work. So in the case of TransferWise, there's a view that there's an absolute corrupt approach to how money moves. There's a lack of transparency about costs, and costs are hidden. And so they have a very clear frustration and fury at the current system, and they have a very clear vision for how things should be. So for TransferWise, money should move around the world, across borders, in an instant, as fast as a WhatsApp message, and at the same price point as a WhatsApp message. So if you have that clarity of purpose, and that is your nucleus for everything. It's how you hire, it's how you make decisions, it's how you run your business, it's how you cost your business, it's how you engage with stakeholders. It's absolutely everything throughout your organization. And everything becomes super, super simple at that point. So I think a lot of what has been said really resonates. And I think a couple of things to draw out as to what works with that. So for TransferWise, as for many fintechs, understanding their pricing and seeking to pass on cost savings and essentially get to unit pricing so you can really drive down those costs to customers was a huge focus. And that then embedded through the purpose a responsibility across the organization. So without really having to have principles and structures and standards and KPIs, everybody understood that that was their responsibility. The other part with fintechs is absolute obsession with the customer, absolute obsession with it. So they did customer listening very, very well. So we had happy customers and unhappy customers work streams, and they would literally put every single thing on a work program. So anything that was going well, it was about doing more of that. Anything that was going badly was about essentially eradicating every single one of those problems over time. Two other things I just want to mention that we can steal. One is a concept called minimum viable product, which some people will have heard of. which is the idea that when you're bringing through changes and you're trying to iterate on your service offering or your product offering, having a go and experimenting, the customers are actually fine with that if they understand that that's what you're doing and you're trying to make it better for them. So lots of user testing, lots of feedback loops, and being comfortable with shots on goal and the fact that it's not going to be perfect from the beginning. And the other thing is a concept called the blameless retro, which I really took on board for my legal team and really changed the way that we thought about our work. And that's about when anything happens, positive or negative, you're getting together and you're doing a super quick and efficient evaluation of what happened and what can we learn. And then everybody takes that learning forward and nobody is blamed. Yes, there might be corrections that are needed, but what that does over time is it overwrites our fears of mistakes and encourages towards an innovation and an improvement for customers. So just some initial thoughts, perhaps that will help people on a practical level.
That's great, thank you. You're talking about living purpose being quite a collaborative effort within a business, that everyone has a part to play, that it's a collective responsibility. There's a lot of talk at the moment anyway about collaboration between law firms. Perhaps you might say a bit more talk than action, as I understand it. But I just wonder whether you think that firms could usefully collaborate with one another or with other sorts of organizations to define their own purposes, or should they be holding tight to that as to their purposes or values or other things in this space, or should they be holding tight to that as sort of a differentiator?
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, I kind of obsess about the S in ESG, the social angle, and I'm very mindful that as a community, as an ecosystem, lawyers and legal professionals and people working in the law, we actually have a collective purpose that is written into our regulation and written into the expectations of society when they look to us. So actually, we have a common purpose, all of us, which is to serve in whatever version that is through the law. So actually, we have a lot more in common than we perhaps might realize. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be trying to run the best business we can, but I do think there's a huge opportunity, an untapped opportunity for collaboration in this space. At LawTech UK, we just did a whole piece of work, and you can have a look online at our report, and we saw that there's actually a 22 billion opportunity annually for technology-enabled and digital-enabled legal services. And that is not just the newfangled tech products and services. That's just people who need legal services and they want to consume it digitally. So there's a real opportunity, and people do not have to do it on their own. There's some really interesting models at the moment. One I'd massively recommend is get involved in the marketplaces. So we worked with a tech in our LawTech Sandbox, which was one of our R&D initiatives to increase transformative innovation in the law. And one of our cohort was called Legal Utopia. And they've built an environment where a client, an individual or a business can go to this tool and get some initial triage of their issue. They can get some standard documents, etc. But at some point, they're going to need to speak to a human being, and they're going to want that, and they will always want that. And that's the bit where all of you come in. So you may be serving your communities extremely well, but your range and your reach could be even larger, particularly now everybody's working digitally. You could serve people in other parts of the country and in fact the world. And these types of tools are marketplaces that enable people to connect through an app to an actual human being like you in your firms. It has got to be a no-brainer, and there's a lot of people getting on that, which is fantastic to see. I would also say that anything around collaboration, obviously don't just do it for the sake of it so you can say that you're doing something, or that, the greenwashing, purpose washing thing that Christina talked about. But if there's a particular problem that your customers face, that you're going after, that you're going to try to address, find others who can help you do that, or who are already doing that. We're seeing some models with local universities as well. We're seeing some stuff in Manchester and Liverpool, in Swansea, other places. So that's something to explore. And then on a more ambitious scale, you see firms like Minster Law in York working with a law tech to actually build a portal, a platform for traffic claims. So there's lots of different models, but I would say just start somewhere and target something very, very practical, a very practical use case for you and your customers.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Before we move on, we've had a couple of questions. One's for Peter, so I'm going to try and put that to him at the end, although I think he is eagerly typing an answer at the moment. We also have one. I liked the SPIRIT acronym, but I missed what the R and the second I stood for. Was that one of yours, Jennifer? Were you mentioning?
No, it was Peter.
Acronym? That was Peter, so we'll have to get back to him for that as well. Thank you, Jennifer. Speak to you again in a little while. And finally, we have, as I also mentioned earlier, Colum Smith, who is the Chief Vision Officer for Taylor Rose MW. We saw him a little while ago, and yes, now he's back again. Hello, Colum. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good, great. So you have vision in your title. I think you're the only one of the panelists who does. So your firm is obviously is going for growth. Is that the vision? Is that the purpose? Have you had to establish a new vision as part of your role, or are you sort of delivering on a vision?
I think that's
a few questions there.
Yeah, I'm going to do a classic lawyer's one and say I would phrase the questions differently.
Fair.
Taylor Rose and Macmillan Williams were two different law firms with two different visions, with two different approaches. The objective back in 2019 was to take the strengths from both of those law firms, put them together and create a different vision. Then COVID arrived and that entire plan was shelved because in reality that wasn't going to work in the environment we were in. So we went back to the drawing board, started again. And what we've now ended up with is a less office-based, more working from home, more open, collaborative approach. So not what we did before, which was heavily locked down. You had to be in an office, you had your team with you, and we are not going to return to that type of vision, which means everybody has to become a bit more of a specialist. Everybody has to be a bit more flexible, and there has to be a high degree of trust. I do not know what the majority of my staff do on an individual day. What I do know is what results they achieve. So I look at the results rather than what they're doing. When I look back, I used to pay quite a lot of attention to what they did and then the results. Whereas now I look at the results. What we've done specifically is we have, and I was listening to the other panelists, we've set up sub-companies. So we have separate limited companies that have separate tasks with separate objectives. And what we do with those is we are able to say to Team A, your job is to increase the profit margin. Team B, your job is to deliver the IT. Team C, your job is to deliver civil litigation. Team D, your job is to deliver property. But I don't worry now about the property department delivering the profit margin. That's with Team A. They do what they do best, which is to do domestic residential conveyancing safely. That's what they do. And as usual, I expect them to be customer focused, look after their clients. So I've stopped using the sort of things I would have done about client focused, we're different and all the rest of it. What I've discovered is most law firms are very similar. We've bought a lot of law firms. They are all largely similar. The staff are all largely the same and they largely have the same gains. We've run academies, we run training sessions. We used to do litigation training in the Royal Courts of Justice for all our trainees and juniors, and you'd end up with the finalists going in and fighting out a criminal trial in front of a jury and a High Court judge. We've done all of those things, and we've tried lots of stuff. What we've found is what people like to do is largely, this is not going to come as a surprise to anyone, what they want to do. So the question actually has become establishing what do they want to do. I started out thinking, actually, that wouldn't be too difficult because you'd ask them, wouldn't you? And they would tell you. No, that turned out to be wholly inaccurate. In fact, a lot of people don't actually know what they want. So you have to give them experiences to see if they can decide. So we do a lot of sandboxes, which is obviously what one of your panelists was saying. So try lots of sandboxes, try lots of things. And again, that becomes quite interesting because I found that the biggest problem with sandboxes was me, because I was going in with a conceited, preconceived idea. So I knew what the outcome would be. We'd go through this sandbox process. We'd come out with something largely in my vision. and then we would implement it. That also turned out to be inaccurate. Having done a cross-check of what I thought was going to happen written on a board in advance versus what our clients and staff wanted, the only conclusion we could come to is that I must not be allowed to choose anything, because on a success rate, I had slightly less than 0. I didn't even get close. So at that point, you now understand that you don't really know what your clients want. You don't really know what your staff want. You're not sure how to execute it, and you could make lots of mistakes. So what we did was we embraced the fact that we're going to make mistakes. We made that not something that was going to cause a problem for anyone. You weren't going to sit in your annual review with a list of all the mistakes you made. That wasn't the test anymore. The test was, could we come out with a commercially viable option that our clients and our staff liked? And as a result, would that increase A, turnover, but B, more importantly, profit? And the answer for that was, yes, we could do that.
Okay. So you have been able to, the model that you mentioned, or the priority that you mentioned of letting people decide what they want to do, that's something you have actually been able to make happen, or have you had to, in some cases, get people to do things that they don't want to do as well?
Both, the answer to that.
It has been both.
Because obviously some people end up in a job which they prefer not to do because they happen to be excellent at it. And that is very difficult to deal with. When I've got someone who doesn't want to do job A, but they are superb at it, and I don't have anyone else available to do that job. So I normally negotiate, and I say, would you do that job for a while, and then would you find and train your next person to take over? And I like them to train and find the next person. So I have a business analyst yesterday who was working with me, who was doing his first set of interviews on hiring his replacement. And his question to me was, I've come down to the final 2. I like both of them. Will you pick one? And I said, no, you pick one. Because ultimately, if this person can't do your job, you'll be back doing this job. You want to move on in the business, hire and train your replacement. It's down to you. You've got a 3-month overlap. That should be long enough to do so. I suggest you pick the right candidate. I thought both candidates were perfectly reasonable. But I sat in the interview only to the point of view of sitting in the background. They knew I was there, but I didn't ask any questions.
Okay. I know acquiring businesses, obviously merging has been a key part of your strategy, certainly recently. And you've had to merge firms through the pandemic. We've in LPM we've heard lots about obviously the challenges of merging in more normal times. Have those challenges been different this time around? Have you got any perspective on that?
Much harder is the answer, because you can't get your vision out. And even if you can get your vision out, you're not really going to communicate it properly unless you can do more direct approaches. I've done Zoom calls and various other meetings. It doesn't work as well. We're now working our way around the firm, retraining senior and junior staff in groups of about 10. And that will take us a year probably to do that. Whereas before, we would have had a couple of large sessions in a big hotel, and we would have delivered the message from that, and then we would have broken it down afterwards into smaller groups. We found that doesn't particularly work. And we accept that we will lose some staff over it, we will lose some clients over it. It will take us longer than we should have done, but the smaller sessions work very well.
Okay. What's the most difficult change that you've had to introduce, either the complexity or perhaps the popularity of it?
I would say that's for the senior management team, having to trust our staff to be at home, doing what they need to do in a regulated environment where normally we would have a lot more systems locked down. That's I found that very stressful. The
remote sort of management aspect.
The remote management, and it's not a question of them doing it. It's our problem, not theirs. They've actually adapted rather well. It's been management that struggled, not them.
Okay, thanks, Colum. You're going to stay with us if that's all right, and I'm going to welcome back the other faces that you've already seen, Christina and Jennifer and Peter, to pick up on some of those things. But first, I've got to put the question that came through for Peter to him, which might sort of set the ball rolling. Actually, Peter, I think you were looking at answering this anyway. How do you address conflict and disagreements, perhaps about vision or values. I don't know if that's what the anonymous attendee had in mind. Is consensus necessary for policies and values to work, or can you force them through?
So it's a really good question, and for me, the way in which I've approached it is to take the issue back to what our shared sense of purpose is as a firm, and that behaviour framework, and ask for help from the person who you think actually maybe just going slightly off the right path. Just help me in understanding why you think what you have done resonates with our sense of purpose and our behaviour framework, and explain what the impact of their behaviours has been. The important thing to do is to bear in mind is always be consistent, and you've got to be consistent in terms of all that decision making, because sure as eggs are eggs, if you start to appear to favour one person against somebody else in the firm, you will lose credibility. And also that issue around integrity will suddenly disappear as well, because as I said, for me, integrity is always doing the right thing, even when nobody else is looking, and being able to sleep easy at night. So try and pull it back to why we do what we do as a firm. In terms of consensus, if you can get consensus for policies, then all well and good, that's brilliant. Don't expect it, because sometimes when you introduce new policies, you've got to take people through a change curve, and as a leader you will be often ahead of the game, and you will be thinking perhaps 2-3 years ahead, and some people won't have quite got to that place in their own headspace. But think about the policies as a mechanism for you delivering on your purpose as a firm.
Was it? Sorry, go ahead.
And I think the pandemic has taught us one thing, and that is to be far more outcomes focused than task driven.
Yes, that's something Colum mentioned, isn't it? Yeah. It's more important to think about what that infinite game is that Christina so wisely talked about, and it's being able to stay on the pitch and understanding what your unique differentiating position is. So I hope that helps. Yes, thank you. Was it you that used the SPIRIT acronym? We had a question about the SPIRIT acronym, and so is that I for integrity, perhaps?
No, the first I is integrity, the second I is innovation, and the R is respect.
There we go. I just needed to get that one answered from one of the books. Is it from one of the books that you mentioned?
No, it's our own values. It's the acronym for our team Paris Smith values.
Excellent. Okay. I suppose connected to that idea of what to do if others aren't living the values that you want them to. What should firms do when they encounter other organisations in sort of working life that don't appear to share their values? Dare I say it, even their clients? Christina?
This is always a tricky one, isn't it? Really difficult, because the simple answer is no shared values, no room for them. But actually, I think the more sensible answer is that we're all on a journey. And actually, particularly around things like diversity and inclusion, what I found I work with law firms of all different shapes and sizes. But actually, if you can start a discussion with your client about this issue, and it's with humility, I think you've got a sense throughout the presentations and what people have been saying that leaders do need to be really humble in this. And nobody has got the right answers. Nobody, I think, should be in their glass house, because the stones will get thrown. But actually to see if there is that possibility of engaging, and it has worked, I think, on many occasions I can think of, where the client has said, yeah, actually, we were having real problems with how, what we do about sustainability, diversity and inclusion, you know, how do we respond to Black Lives Matter? Can we have a discussion about this? Can we share ideas? And actually that can lead to much greater insight for everyone, and you know what, much stickier clients, because they are, you know, predominantly talking about business clients here, but you know, that means that you're engaging with them on a different level to the transactional, I have a legal problem, I need somebody to fix it. And I think if we look for the positive and we look for the like-mindedness in not just with our clients, but our suppliers, indeed our competitors, yeah, as Peter's saying, it's actually, you know, this, in many ways, if we're thinking about the long term, we're not thinking about winning. There are no winners and losers. We're just thinking about getting better, you know, being much better at what we do and what our just cause is, what our purpose is. So I think you can find that if you look for it. And also, I would say, if you find that clients are behaving, and Colum and Peter both appropriately talked about the behaviours in a way which actually offends your firm's or your personal values, then you probably do need to disarm those comments if if you're going to be a good ally. It isn't, integrity, as Peter said, isn't about just having, you know, the person in the room who's going to be offended. It's actually, you know, disarm a comment, be really clear about the difference between intention and impact, and hopefully, you know, that can move things on, and again, greater understanding, acknowledgement of the issues, and acceptance of responsibility can come from that. So I think there are ways that we can be really impactful with our clients and others.
Yes, lots to think about there. Yeah, humility, absolutely. That's definitely something that's come across. Authenticity, vulnerability, something that Peter mentioned as well, wasn't it? I've got to ask questions from those who are listening, prioritise those above my own. What Colin Willett asks to all, what process did you follow in deciding your key values and mission? I think we had an answer on that from Peter, but how about Jennifer at one of the businesses that you have led in the past, been responsible for in the past? How did you set about deciding on the vision or the values?
Yes, I'm also thinking about some of the tech companies that we work with across Tech Nation.
Or one of those, yeah.
There are lots of different playbooks for this, but at a basic level, it's about being really clear what it is that you're delivering to the market. So what is it that you see that customers need? And once you figure out what your why is, which I'm sure you all have because you're already delivering legal services, it might be that you want to refine exactly which elements of that are your priority versus others. But once you know what it is you want to do with that, then the way that you do it is about, frankly, the leadership. So I know it is, you know, the zeitgeist to bring the entire community into a conversation, but it has to start somewhere. And having worked with companies that have really, really strong purpose-driven businesses and those that are a little weaker and more nebulous, or where they have lost it, it's about leadership. And they talk about the fish rotting from the head. And I would say that that's absolutely true. So, for example, at TransferWise, and I've seen this in other fintechs I've worked with, and I've seen it through our work at LawTech UK, when the founder speaks from the heart about what it is they stand for, what it is they're delivering, then that jolts you up in your seat when they say it from the heart. And if that feels incongruent or like it's taken on as a label, then there is this gap. And in that gap comes the mess. And I think it's also really important. It was interesting linking that to what Christina said there. It becomes very easy to keep people back anchored to that benchmark. Nobody really lives it like the founders and the leaders. Now, of course, what then happens is you have your talent. It actually produces a talent magnet. So once you've got those values in place, and honestly, I would keep it super simple. If you've got more than 3, I think it's great to have an acronym. If you've got more than 3, we had this at Yahoo, which was a very strong values-driven business. People would always get to 4 and go, what was number 4? So I think there's a piece about keeping it simple, and also getting the feedback loop from the community. And that's not just the staff base, but it's also the wider stakeholder community. And keeping it under review, I would say, is really important. And I'm sure others who've rolled this out more recently might have something to add.
You say the wider stakeholders, for example, the clients.
The clients. I mean, at one business I worked with, which was a children's digital entertainment company, we had a chair in every meeting room, which was the children's chair. So sometimes it would be filled with a person who would actually represent the customer, but there was always a sort of conscious representation of who it was that we were actually serving that was sitting in that room. And honestly, if you've got a 12-year-old kid in the room when you're talking about a product that affects them or decision-making that affects a service, you find yourself just aligning to a higher standard, because you're presented with your customer and you're like, well, am I making the right decision? Am I really acting with integrity, or am I kind of doing what the innovation by press release or the integrity by press release thing? So whatever it is that you can do. Another thing we did, and I've seen companies do, is have advisory boards or sort of informal advisory boards that are drawn from a wider community, that cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary ethos that we're seeing coming through more and more, and that's fantastic. So for example, I've run teams where I've had somebody from engineering, somebody from UX, somebody from marketing, somebody from customer service, all looking at my plans and my team's plans. So, it's not always easy if you've got a smaller firm, but there might be some ideas there for people to bring in a bit of diversity of thought into that engagement.
Yes, interesting. Thanks. I had to bring the clients in there because Nigel Wallace asks, is the secret to achieving sustainable growth in a disrupted market less about internal organizational debates, which of course we've talked about quite a bit, it's fair to say, more about talking with clients about what they want and then providing it. Only got a couple more minutes, so I'm going to throw that one over to Colum, if that's all right. So you've got 2 minutes on that, Colum. What about vision when it comes to clients?
It's the second part of that question. It's what the client wants. The subcontext to that is, what does the client want? So does the client necessarily know what the client wants? I find quite a lot of the time that what the client actually wanted wasn't what the client told me they wanted. Okay. So you go on this journey of what does the client want. So if you're doing transactional work, which we do a lot of, the client will tell you they want a speedy, efficient service with the smallest amount of stress. Actually, what the client wants is when they call you, you answer their call. It actually isn't much more complicated than that. Yes. They're not that interested in the law. They're interested in a human being being able to tell them it is going to be okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And actually, it's that trust and reassurance. So whether it's management or whether it's clients, if your clients and your staff trust you, you will have a successful business. If your clients and your staff don't trust you, you won't have a successful business. Therefore, I find that the most interesting call for me is a member of staff who I haven't spoken to in, say, 18 months will ring me on a Saturday at 3 p.m. and I see their name come up on the phone. I know it's their personal mobile. I have nearly all the senior staff's personal mobiles in my phone. There is no reason that you're going to call me at 3 p.m. on a Saturday unless it's serious. What they want me to do is to take that call, deal with that problem in a human nature, confirm what they need to do, and then allow them to do it with the support of the firm. Now, whether that's a very serious matter that involves a regulator or whether that is a matter of a personal issue, I know before I answer the call, more likely to be a personal issue than a regulatory one. It could be a member of staff being assaulted. It could be they've been told they've got terminal cancer. It could be their child's been injured. All of those have happened on numerous occasions and will no doubt happen again in the future. Yeah. With clients, sometimes it's as serious as that and you have that type of scenario, but a lot of the time it's the clients just want to understand that everything is going to be okay inside a complicated process. Delivering that message without talking down to your client is the art. We do this every day. We know exactly what's going to happen on the process. We know the start, the middle, and the end. If the second you forget that your clients don't understand that, and for some of them are doing it, particularly for us, for the first time, and they might not use our service again for 7 or 10 years. That's actually the understanding you need. So it's back to that empathy, trust is probably more important than legal skills. Legal skills I can teach. Teaching empathy is much more difficult. What we did at management, we took every partner, we put them in a group of 6. We put them in with an external person who is now the CEO of a new bank. This is his latest job. He took you on an emotional journey about his personal experience. The biggest outcome, I went through the course. Most people would burst into tears during the course of that session. And he would ask each person to express a view of their biggest emotional trauma event. All of those were under Chatham House rules, so I don't know what those events were. I do know the vast majority of our staff cried. The staff were randomly selected to go into the groups. And we now have what I call these invisible connections. So there will be someone in crime in London who has a connection with someone in conveyancing in Bognor. Why? Because they were in that group of 8.
I'm going to have to stop. Sorry, Colum, I'm going to have to stop you there because we've got to go straight on to another session. But I like the way that it's brought us right back to outcomes and behaviours as well, which people were talking about. Not just values, not just being words on a page, but being lived as well. Thank you very much to all my guests for this first session of LPM 2021 Digital. That's Colum Smith, Peter Taylor, Christina Blacklaws, and Jennifer Swallow, of course. And I hope to see you and speak to you again at some of our other sessions happening this week. So thank you very much and have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.